Have you ever tried to change a destructive habit, but it seems that something inside you always pulls you back, be it an addiction to food, social networks, cigarettes, alcohol, or even toxic relationships? It seems that no matter how much you try, you can't stop. But what if I told you that these addictions didn't come out of nowhere? What if, in fact, they are echoes of your childhood, reflexes of wounds you never realized? Psychology shows that many of the addictive behaviors of adulthood are not just about pleasure or compulsion, but about something much deeper, unconscious attempts to fill emotional voids that were created when we were children. What happens in childhood is not in childhood. The traumas we suffer, whether large or small, shape the way we deal with the world. And when we do not learn to process them healthily, we seek compensation. Today, let's explore how childhood trauma shapes your addictions in adulthood, and most importantly, what you can do to break this cycle. When we talk about childhood trauma, many people imagine extreme events such as abuse or abandonment. But the truth is that not every trauma comes from a violent or tragic experience. Trauma can be much more subtle and silent, have been constantly ignored or invalidated by parents, having learned that expressing emotions was wrong or inconvenient, growing up in an environment where love and approval were conditional. These experiences do not necessarily make scars visible, but leave deep marks on our subconscious. How trauma shapes our emotional responses. As children, we are extremely vulnerable. We depend on others to meet our emotional and physical needs. If for some reason these needs are not met, our childish mind tries to find ways to deal with it. Some children become hyper-independent, learning that they cannot trust anyone. Others develop a constant fear of rejection, becoming anxious and dependent on the approval of others. Some repress their emotions and become adults who escape their own feelings. The problem is that when these standards are not resolved, they do not disappear. They only manifest themselves otherwise in adulthood, often through addictions. If we do not learn to deal with emotional pain in a healthy way, our brain finds ways to relieve this pain, and this is where addictions come into play. But how exactly do addictions serve as an escape to these trauma? If childhood traumas create emotional wounds, addictions often emerge as an unconscious attempt to relieve this pain. Our brain seeks comfort and stability. When we feel anxiety, loneliness, or emotional emptiness, we want something that distracts us from this unpleasant sensation, and addictions offer just that, a quick and temporary escape from pain. How does this escape work? Trauma creates a void. When a child does not receive the necessary emotional support, it grows with a feeling of lack, insecurity, or fear of abandonment. The brain seeks relief, as we do not. Learn to deal with these emotions. We seek something that makes us feel good immediately. Vices appear as a solution. Food, alcohol, drugs, social networks, work compulsion, shopping. All these things disguise emotional pain, even for a short time. Addictions are just the surface. The problem is that addictions do not solve the pain, just mask it. The feeling of relief lasts shortly, and soon after the blame, the emptiness, and the need for more appear. Someone who has grown without love and validation can seek this relief in toxic relationships, becoming dependent on the approval of others. Those who have learned to suppress emotions can use alcohol or drugs to finally turn off the repressed feelings. Those who have felt powerless in childhood can develop vices in control, such as working compulsively to feel in charge of life. Over time, this cycle strengthens itself, becoming an automatic and unconscious pattern. But do all trauma generate the same addictions? No. Each painful experience can lead to a specific type of behavior in adulthood. Not all children's trauma are equal, and each can manifest in different ways in adulthood. Some generate anxiety, others create apathy, while some make us constantly seek the approval of others. Next, we will see some of the main types of trauma and the addictions they can trigger. 1. Trauma of abandonment. Addiction in relationships and approval. Children who grew up feeling that they could not count on their parents or caregivers often develop an unconscious fear of being set aside. This can happen when parents were emotionally distant or unavailable, there was separation from parents, or sudden changes in childhood. The child felt that he needed to deserve love and attention. In adulthood, this can generate addictions in toxic and codependent relationships, constant search for validation on social networks, fear of being alone, leading to impulsive choices in friendships and novels. These people often accept any kind of love, even if it is destructive, just not to feel the pain of rejection. 2. Rejection trauma, addiction in social networks, work or self-image. If a child grew up feeling that he was never good enough, he may develop a chronic fear of not being accepted. This can happen when she was excessively criticized. It was compared to brothers or colleagues constantly. He had to work his best to gain recognition. In adulthood, this can generate addictions in social networks, seeking likes and approval, excessive work, trying to prove its value, expressed caution with the appearance, trying to be perfect to others. This kind of person never feels enough, so he is always looking for ways to prove to others. 3. Control or repression trauma, addiction to food, alcohol, and drugs. If a child grew up in an extremely rigid environment where his emotions were repressed and his wills were not respected, he can develop an emotional escape pattern. This happens when the parents were extremely authoritarian. Expressing emotions was seen as weakness. The child always needed to follow rigid rules without question. In adulthood, this can generate addictions in food as a form of emotional comfort, alcohol and drugs to turn off the mind and escape from internal stiffness, entertainment and video games as an escape from reality. These people have not learned to deal with their own emotions, so they resort to external stimuli to try to relieve repressed pain. 4. Trauma of neglect, addiction to dopamine and rapid stimuli. If a child grew up without sufficient emotional and intellectual stimulus, either because parents were absent, negligent, or simply showed not affection, it can develop a constant search for something that fills this emptiness. This can generate addictions in social networks and short videos, search for constant dopamine, games and pornography, immediate sensations to fill boredom, compulsive consumption of any kind, purchases, food, entertainment. People with this trauma pattern have difficulty focusing on activities that require prolonged effort as their brain has been trained to seek quick rewards. The most important thing here is to realize that addictions are not the real problem. They are just symptoms of something deeper. If you have identified with any of these standards, it means that there is an emotional wound that still needs to be cured. But how to do this? How to break this cycle and recover control over yourself? If addictions are actually a way of dealing with unresolved trauma, then the way to overcome them is not only in willpower or discipline, but in understanding and healing the emotional wounds that feed them. Here are some strategies to break this cycle and recover control over your life. 1. Identify the origin of your addiction. The first step is to get out of the autopilot and ask, what am I really trying to avoid when I use this habit? Does this behavior bring me true pleasure or just temporary relief? If I couldn't use this addiction, what painful feelings would I need to face? Often addiction is not the main problem, but a symptom of something deeper. 2. Face your emotional pain. Jung said that what we resist persists. That is, the more we run away from pain, the more it grows. The way to true change is to look inside and process the repressed feelings. Therapy can help access unconscious memories and standards. Practices such as reflective writing help organize emotions and thoughts. The simple act of allowing yourself without distractions is already a powerful step to break the cycle of emotional escape. 3. Replace the escape with something that heals you. Vices appear as a shortcut to avoid pain. The challenge is to replace this shortcut with something that brings deeper and more significant pleasure. Instead of seeking instant gratification, practice activities that require patience and presence, such as exercise, reading, or learning new skills. Change the distraction for real connection. Converse, express yourself, strengthen ties that really matter, develop a greater purpose. When we have something that really motivates us, distractions lose our strength. 4. Accept that change takes time. Break standards that have existed for years does not happen overnight. Transformation requires patience, compassion with yourself, and above all, conscience. Each time you realize a pattern repeating yourself and choose a different path, you will be taking a step towards freedom. Your addictions do not define who you are. They are just reflexes of wounds that have not yet been healed. The way to overcome them is not repression, but understanding. Now I ask you, what patterns of your adult life do you think they can have roots in your childhood? Have you noticed any repetitive behavior that can be a reflection of an old trauma? Leave your comment and share this video with someone who also needs to understand this process. Subscribe to the channel and enable notifications to more content that help you recover control of your life. We see each other in the next video.